Hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Grad Med Journey. So it feels like it's been a very long time since I've actually done a sit-down video, probably due to a variety of reasons, from second year being really busy to having really long days at uni, so that by the time I get home from the hospital or GP it's probably about 5, 6, sometimes 7 PM, and it's just a bit too late to start filming because obviously housemates might be studying, I have my own studying to do, so the timing of things just hasn't quite worked out. That being said, I'm really excited because I have quite a few videos lined up over the next few months, and for this video and 2 other videos in the future, I'm thrilled to be saying that I'm actually working with Medify. So if you don't know what Medify is, they are a company that have sort of online resources for people applying to medicine, whether that be for a personal statement, the UCAT, previously known as the UKCAT, the BMAT and other things as well. So I'm thrilled to be working with them because if you have watched any of my previous videos, you will know that whenever it comes to especially UCAT preparation, I always highly recommend Medify's service, but I will get onto that a little bit later on. So what I want to cover in today's video is the UCAT, which was previously called the UKCAT. Now that might sound confusing. Basically earlier on in 2019 the UKCAT consortium basically changed the name of the UKCAT, which used to be the United Kingdom Clinical Aptitude Test, just to the UCAT, which is the University Clinical Aptitude Test. Now they've done this probably for a variety of reasons, but one of them is to make it more globally accessible, particularly for Australia and New Zealand, who used to have an exam known as the UMAT, but they have now scrapped that and are now using the UCAT, which was again previously the UKCAT. So what exactly is the UCAT? The UCAT is one of 3 possible admissions tests that some universities use for their application process, whether that be for medicine or dentistry. Despite the change of name, the UCAT is pretty much exactly the same as the UKCAT. So if you've been preparing for the UKCAT and you're stressing because it's suddenly the UCAT, don't worry, it is exactly the same. That being said, the aim of this video is to introduce the UCAT, sort of an updated of the first video I made back in 2017, which was all about the UKCAT. So the UCAT is a test that comprises of 2 main components. The first component is the cognitive sort of section, and under this there are 4 subtests: verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, decision analysis and abstract reasoning. The other section is the non-cognitive component, and this is the situational judgement test. Now I appreciate that's a lot of words, and later on in this video I will be going through what each of those sections are. In total there are 233 questions within the test, with the questions divided among those different subtests as follows. So verbal reasoning has 44 questions, decision making has 29 questions, quantitative reasoning has 36 questions, abstract reasoning has 55 questions, and the situational judgement test has 69 questions. You have a certain number of minutes to answer all the questions within those subtests, and you also get 1 minute's reading time before each section starts. That being said, if you finish a subtest early, say you finish abstract reasoning with 3 minutes to spare, you can't then carry that extra time onto the next section. The timings are specific to each section and can't be used for another subtest. As I said, you do get 1 minute before the start of each subtest to read through the instructions which they give before each section, although if you're anything like me, you know what's going to come up next, and so you just use that 1 minute to sort of take some nice deep breaths, to relax, to just close your eyes, refresh your brain, and mentally prepare for the next subtest. In addition to this, if you do have a specific learning difficulty, whether that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, or if you have a medical condition, or even if you're temporarily injured for whatever reason, there is something known as the UCAT SEN, where you can get special access arrangements, whether that be extra time or sitting it in a room on your own. They have different sort of access arrangements that if you require them, you can apply for them. You can find out more information about this on the UCAT website, of course, but as always, you will need to provide evidence that you actually need these access arrangements. The questions as a whole, when you first look at them, can seem quite difficult. And if you were to go in to the UCAT test having done absolutely no preparation whatsoever, chances are you're A, not going to do very well, and B, you're going to stress because you won't have a clue how to answer the questions, and because it's so time pressured as well, it's just really stressful. So preparation for the UCAT is really important. Later on in this video I am going to be talking about 2 resources that I always highly recommend people use when they are preparing for the UCAT. I did just want to talk briefly about the cost of the UCAT, as I'm sure you're aware different admissions tests do have different costs that apply to them. Because the UCAT is now used both within the UK and the EU, as well as in Australia and New Zealand, there are 2 different prices. Similar to before, if you are taking the UCAT exam, and this is for 2019 dates, if you are sitting the UCAT exam before the 1st of September, then the cost is £65 if you're in the UK or the EU. If it's after this date, then the price rises to £87. There is a fixed fee if you're not within the EU, and that is £115. The earliest that you can sit the UCAT this year is the 1st of July, and the latest that you can sit it is on the 2nd of October. That being said, online registration for the UCAT does close on the 19th of September. As I said, these are for 2019 tests, and the dates do change a little bit year after year, and occasionally the prices change as well, so do check their website. You are only allowed to sit the test once per year, so only once in their July to October sitting. If you take it more than once, they see that as unprofessional behaviour, and that can have negative consequences down the line. In addition, you will sit your UCAT in the summer before you apply. So if you're using UCAS as your applications system, that is normally sent off mid-October, and so you would sit your UCAT exam in the summer beforehand. Finally, if you do take the UCAT, your score from one year can't be passed on to the next, and it must be applicable to that current application cycle. So if I was to be applying to med school this coming October, I couldn't use the UCAT score from, say, summer 2018. I would have to resit the UCAT exam in the summer of 2019. In terms of where you take the UCAT, it's taken at an official test centre, often where you sit your driving theory test here in the UK and other official tests. You will need to book early, and so I do recommend booking your UCAT test as early as possible, just so that you can sit your test at your local test centre, because obviously they have a limited number of spaces on the specific days you want. So book it early if you can. So how do universities actually use your UCAT score? Your UCAT subtests are each scored out of 900. The lowest score you can get is 300, and most people on average it's around about 600, 650. That's the year-on-year general average, but it does change a little bit each year. Those only apply to the quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, verbal reasoning and decision-making section. For the situational judgement test, that is split into bands, and so you're scored from band 1, which is the best, down to band 4. And within that, the vast majority of people sort of get band 2, or band 1 is the next highest band that people often get. So different universities will use your score in different ways. They may take the total score, or they might use your average, or some universities will even use specific scores from some specific subtests, such as verbal reasoning or abstract reasoning. Some universities use the situational judgement test, some universities don't. It's quite variable, and so I would always say to check the website for the universities you're applying to. See if you can read their admissions policies. Often those are available online. And also, if you really can't find the answer, email the med school. It's better to be safe than sorry. That being said, there are a certain number of things that are a common theme amongst how universities use your score. So they might have a cut-off. So some universities say we only look at applications from students who have a UKCAT score above, 2,400, let's say. This number varies year on year, it varies between universities, and some universities don't even use it, but that is one quite common way in which universities use your score. Other universities might rank you on your score and either accept a certain number of people, say the top 1,000 people can go to interview, for example. That's also quite common. Some universities use two different things. So I know that when I was applying, Warwick initially looked at your verbal reasoning score and then looked at your total score. Now, admittedly, they've changed their system now. That's, as far as I'm aware, they don't do that specifically anymore. So as you can see, it changes so often. So it's really important to see how your universities that you are applying to use the scores. Finally, another thing that some universities do is they create their own scoring system. So they sort of place you within certain brackets if you've got a certain score. So say you have a score above 2,500, then they'll put you in one bracket, and if it's between 2,100 and 2,500, you're in another, and 1,800 and 2,100. You get the gist of it. Some universities do that as well. It really is variable, but it might help you decide what universities you're thinking of applying of once you have your UCAT score. So now I just want to go into a little bit more detail about each of the subtests. So as I said at the start, there are 4 cognitive subtests and then the non-cognitive subtest, the situational judgement test. So the first test is the verbal reasoning test. In this test, you are given a passage of text, sometimes 1 paragraph, sometimes 2 or 3, it can really vary. And then there are 2 different types of questions that you can be given. You need to find out certain conclusions or inferences from the text itself. The first type of question is true, false, or can't tell. So they will give you, say, a conclusion or an inference, and then you need to say whether that is true, whether it is false, or if you can't tell because the paragraph does not give you enough information. The other type of question is you have to select the most appropriate statement. They give you a list of statements and you have to select the most appropriate one that fits the paragraph. That is the harder type of question in the verbal reasoning section because it's quite a bit longer and it takes quite a lot more analysis and a deeper understanding of the text itself. But those are becoming more and more popular and are probably the greatest number of questions out of the verbal reasoning subtest. The next section is the decision-making section. So before 2016, this was known as decision analysis, but now in the decision-making section, you may be given text, you may be given like diagrams, graphs, charts, Venn diagrams, probabilities, things like that. And the questions can really, really vary. And you just have to select the best answer or the correct answer out of 5. So the next test is the abstract reasoning test. This is a test which they will give you sort of sets of images. And they'll be arranged in a certain way, whether it's by colour, size, shape, they might be changed due to rotation or transformations, things like that. From this, there are 4 types of questions that you might be asked. So the first type, you are given sort of set A and then set B. And so then they will show you an image and then your task is to determine whether the image they give you belongs to set A or set B. The second type of question is where you need to select the next image that follows on from a sequence. A third type of question that they could give you is where you get sort of pairs. So this image is to this, which would be another set of pictures or images, as this is to that. And then the second that, you would have to select from the choices, if that makes sense. So essentially you're completing the statement, but it's in pairs as opposed to following on from a whole sequence. The final type of question that you can be given for abstract reasoning is where, again, you are given sort of set A and set B, and they ask you specifically which shape goes into set B, or which shape would you put into set A. So those are the 4 types of questions that you can get in abstract reasoning. So the situational judgement test, which for me personally was probably my favourite, is where you are given certain scenarios, often related to healthcare or being a healthcare professional of some sort. This section doesn't require any sort of medical or background or scientific knowledge, but it just requires you to have a very basic understanding of ethical principles. So you might be having to rate how appropriate a certain action would be, whether it's the most appropriate or the least appropriate, or you may be asked to rate the importance of a certain consideration. So those are the subtests of the UCAT. I have other videos which give tips and tricks as to how to improve your score in those specific tests, although now I'd just like to generally talk about preparation for the UCAT. For me personally, the best way to prepare is with practice. Practice, 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 and more practice. Personally, I probably revised or prepared even for a minimum of 6 weeks, but probably more like 8 weeks before my UCAT. Not particularly intense, maybe a couple of hours for the first 5 or 6 weeks, and then 6 to 8-ish hours in the last 2 weeks before my test itself. But in terms of resources, there are sort of 2 main categories. You can have your online resources and you can have your offline resources. But in this particular video, to save it being 3 hours long, I would just like to talk about one online resource, which is Medify, and one offline resource, which is a book. For the online resource, I mentioned Medify, and I mentioned them briefly at the start of the video. I genuinely believe that Medify is an amazing resource. I used it the second time. So I sat the UCAT, or then UKCAT, twice. I sat it for undergrad medicine, and then I sat it when I applied for graduate entry medicine. And I didn't use it when I applied for undergraduate medicine. But honestly, when I used it again in 2016, it changed everything. And I know that sounds quite dramatic, but it just made it so much easier. I think they have over 10,000 questions now, which is crazy. When I say you need to do practice for the UCAT, that is like lots of practice. They have full mock tests, they have sub-test mocks, so you can just practice verbal reasoning. They have timed and untimed questions. You can see sort of where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are. And for me, that was really important because it meant I could see where I wasn't doing so well and what I needed to work on a little bit more. Another really nice thing that it did was it gives you feedback to help you improve, but also gives you a score, like an estimated score that you might get on your UCAT. And obviously it's probably not going to be exactly right, but it gives you a really, really good idea as to how you're going to do when you sit your test, and you can see how you are improving. It's a really comprehensive package, and it honestly has everything you need. It has video tutorials and web pages with feedback and sort of information on the different types of questions and methods that you can use to approach the different questions and subtypes. So I highly recommend Medify as your main resource, essentially. I used it probably 80% of the time, and then 100% of time once I had finished going through the book that I'm about to talk about now. So the book that I recommend would be 1250 UKCAT questions with full mock by Oliver Pickard. Now this is written by a company called ISC. They have a range of books for different admissions tests, but this book has plenty of questions. It only had, I think, 1,000 when I did my UKCAT, so it's got even more questions now. Some people have said that it's harder than the UCAT or UKCAT test itself. I would say that for some questions, yes, in particular in the quantitative reasoning practice section of the book. That being said, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and it can make the easier questions feel a lot easier. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Each question has detailed sort of descriptions on how it should be answered, but this is standard, and Medify definitely does this as well. At the end of the day, any practice is practice, and the more questions you do, the more familiar you are with the questions, the question types, how you answer them, different techniques that may or may not be useful for you, and that can only be a good thing. So I hope you have found this video useful and it's given you some insight into the UCAT. If you have any questions about the UCAT applying to medicine, graduate entry medicine in the UK, then please do send me a message. Please do check out my website. I don't know if any of you know, but I do have sort of like a forum feature on my website where you can talk to other people who are applying to medicine or who are current med students. It needs more people to sign up to really get going, so if you could sign up, that would be fantastic. You can read my blog. I'm very active over on Instagram, so please be sure to follow me there at The Grad Med Journey. You can also follow me on Twitter. I have a Facebook page, again, The Grad Med Journey. And yes, you can contact me through any of those methods. That's perfectly fine. I really love speaking to you guys, hearing about your progress and your medical applications and your future plans. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I hope you found this useful, and I shall see you all next time. Bye.